Hi everyone, this is Stefano from Sonixinema. Welcome to the third episode of Behind the Music. Today I'm incredibly excited to be speaking with composer extraordinaire Jacob Shea. Jacob has worked on some of the biggest nature documentary series ever created, like Planet Earth and Blue Planet. He's the lead composer at Bleeding Fingers, which is one of the most sought after composer collective studios in the world, and works regularly alongside composers like Hans Zimmer, Steve Jablonski, and Henry Jackman. So today we'll be discussing his journey, how it is to work at Bleeding Fingers, streaming royalties, and a lot more.
Hey Jacob, hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. How about you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh yeah, of course, it's my pleasure.
Is that your new studio?
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of very slow going at the moment, but it's like I've got it. There's like furniture to be done, but like it's going to be a great space. It's just completely empty at the moment. Yeah.
Wow, is that like so you can work from home more often, let's say?
Yeah, exactly. We've just welcomed our third and final child to the clan, and so
Oh, really? Third? Wow, congratulations.
yeah. She was born on the 24th of November, so we're still kind of in the early stages and not getting any sleep and all that. So I've got coffee.
So I'd like to kick off by talking about how you started out. As I mean, you're an incredibly successful composer, worked on some of the best films and shows around. So it would be great to know how you got to where you are. Like if there was a meeting or a film or something that kickstarted everything, or it was more like gradual.
Yeah. I mean, really, the place that I always kind of attribute the whole path originating is with this guy Alex Werman, who's a fantastic composer. He did the score for March of the Penguins, and he's done a ton of stuff. When I was in college, he did this independent film called 13 Conversations About One Thing, and my folks, just randomly, we were on like a vacation, a winter vacation. They rented it, and I thought the music was awesome, and I thought it must have been Thomas Newman, because at that point, that was the only composer I kind of like knew as a person and respected like what they, I was just like, oh, if it's good film music, it's probably Thomas Newman. And when it popped up as Alex Werman, I was like, wait, someone other than Thomas Newman can do like movies and stuff.
Well, yeah.
And so I listened to the soundtrack, and when it came time for like my summer break, junior year of college, I emailed him because he had a website with a contact, and I said, look, I really, loved your score, and I want to kind of see what it's like to do what you do. If you're willing to have me, shadow you for a summer, I would welcome that. And I was going to school in Santa Barbara, which is about an hour and a half from Los Angeles, driving. And so I was just like, I'll just rent a place down there. And he got back to me and said, yeah, come on down. And
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I spent the summer just every day kind of like as a, glorified intern, I guess is what you would call it. But he really let me hang out with him and kind of showed me, like, up until that point, I was using Finale as like my only composition software. I didn't know that there were samplers, and I didn't know that there were like sequencers that triggered the samplers, and kind of, he was using Logic, and it just opened up the world of like what was possible in a computer-based, music making environment, where you don't even need to necessarily, have the biggest budget to go record, a bunch of it, just as a person that was like, oh, I want to get ideas out, and this is a vehicle to do that. It was eye-opening, crazy. Yeah.
So that's had you like a big influence on you, like also now like with modular scenes, or like, so do you bring something with you? from the experience?
I mean, that modular synths is largely credited with Hans. I'd say Alex just before then I was like, okay, when I graduate, either I will pursue a PhD program and teach composition, because I really enjoyed like teaching and stuff, and I was teaching guitar at the time, and to college students and stuff, and so I just thought maybe I'd just go on the kind of collegiate route and just be a teacher. And after I hung out with Alex for that summer, I just thought, okay, I gotta give myself like whatever postgraduate study time I would give myself in order to complete a PhD. I'm going to give myself that amount of time to try and be a media composer. And so I moved down to LA. It helped that my now wife, then girlfriend, she was planning on moving back to LA because that's where she was from. And so when she graduated college, like, I'm going back to LA. It's like, all right, well, I think something's, happening there. And so I wanted to stay with her. And so I came down here, and it kind of all lined up. Then off of Craigslist, I got an interview with Trevor Morris as an assistant. It was super like random that it was a Craigslist thing. But
yeah,
at first
don't think what happened not in this, like at this time in the present. Trevor Morris on Craigslist.
That's the thing. Like, I consider myself so lucky. You can have like hard work and you can be a hardworking person and have ambition and talent and all of those things, but like being born at the right time and being an adult at a certain point in like the evolution of technology and stuff is like complete luck. It's just like, I just found myself in a very lucky position where the internet was a very new thing, and people were like kind of really approachable if you sought them out. I don't think that that's quite so true nowadays.
So you started with them like as an intern, let's say, or assistant?
Exactly. I worked with him for 4 months he was at the time renting a room inside of remote control inside of Hans's camp. And
good place to be.
I worked really, really hard for the guy.
I bet, yeah. He sounds like a very hard worker, like from interviews. No holidays or just gosh, must have been hell.
It was really difficult. But he was instrumental in kind of, it was boot camp in a lot of ways. But when we amicably decided that it wasn't a good fit, me being his assistant. But during my time there, I become good friends with this guy Pete Snell, who's an incredible music editor now, but back then was Hans's technical assistant. Pete found out that I was leaving, and he was like, Hans, this guy is like a really hard worker, and like he's smart, and we should bring him on our team. And so when I ended my time with Trevor, Hans was like, yeah, come work for me. And so,
gosh, you popped a bottle of champagne tonight.
Yeah, no, it was the most insane kind of turn of events.
How old were you roughly, just to have an idea? How old, like in your 20s or?
Yeah, at that point, I think I was 27. In terms of like assistants, I was maybe one of the older guys. It's crazy to think because, now being as old as I am, I think that's rather young, but there were guys that were coming in straight out of high school. And so there'd be like 19-year-olds walking around. Yeah. There were people that like knew that they wanted to try their hand at that and knew that the earlier they started, the better off they'd be. And so, yeah, comparatively, I was kind of a bit on the older side, but I started assisting him technically in that kind of, I was in that position for 5 years, and during the 5 years,
5 years.
it
Okay.
became a little less technical and a bit more creative kind of with each iteration.
I suppose that's a good message for people who think that assisting, okay, I'm going to orchestrate and compose. Actually, wait, you might have to do a lot of technical things first, and then maybe slowly it can give you more things to compose. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It was, I mean, there were moments where I would, kind of feel like, is this ever going to turn the corner and become a creative thing? Because all I'm doing, that was probably 2 years, I was doing just technical work. And it was, with the kind of demands of the job, in a weird way, being really solid on the technical stuff is kind of a component of being successful at the creative stuff. And so it was like really, invaluable to kind of go, okay, it might not be just orchestrating and arranging and writing and the things that I'm kind of dreaming of doing, but it taught me a foundation that like really has helped me in the long run tremendously.
Yeah. And I suppose the work with the Trevor before, like you weren't just starting out like this high school student. You knew, already pretty much what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I came at it just at a very lucky time in my life where I had enough other experiences to kind of build off of, and so by the time like I actually was working with Hans, it wasn't like I was starting from nothing. Yeah.
From then you basically never left.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still there. I mean, I'm here today, but yeah, that was 2007. So
suppose now you're in a position maybe like Hans, where people come in and
I'm not in a position. Hans is like the, he's the man of that whole campus. But it's crazy to think that like there are people that look at my work and go, oh, I might want to work with him or something, to traverse that kind of arc in 15 years and be at the same physical location as a trip.
Yeah, because it's such an amazing place, like I don't know, like probably 100 of composers. I don't know too much about like a lot of people. Yeah, so someone and someone can help you, and then you get to know lots of people and get involved in so many projects probably.
That's the wonderful thing, is like you're exposed to so many different ways of working, and like as a kind of creative person, there are certain things that you really respond to, either sonically or compositionally. That there are things you're just naturally drawn to, and being exposed to, like, I mean, I just assisted a lot of different people and did like random jobs. I helped out Heitor Pereira on Despicable Me back in the day, and like just going into his room and seeing that everything he did was coming from him as a performer. And Hans and a lot of his disciples are very program driven. It's a lot of it is like the piano roll and manipulating controller data and making things sound beautiful that way. And Heitor, you go in his room and there would be like 500 instruments just like across the floor, and he would just record and layer and layer and layer and layer. And I always just thought, like, okay, these are very different approaches, and they yield very different results. And I liked some things about both of them, but being exposed to both of them, I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I'm hired for a job that's kind of looking for a sound that I can't really do in the programming realm, it would be good to have a couple instruments lying around. And so that's when my kind of obsession in kind of like modular synths and random, like I'm a guitar player by trade, or by, like, that was my first instrument. And so I've got like basically anything that you can pluck with a string. I've got like just a family of instruments, so that you know, I can be yeah, just a more dynamic music producer. It
An
to
amazing
be
collection of string instruments. Yeah. So
yeah,
big
yeah.
show. Wow.
I mean, you don't need to be, you know, a virtuoso in order to deliver a kind of believable performance in a kind of large tech.
So you see yourself sort of being in between this like tech, like Hans and like Hector Pereira, more like live instrument. Do you think you sit in between, or like?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't have the facility with, like, Hans is a master programmer. His demos are like legendary, you know. And Heitor is like a virtuoso guitar player. I mean, truly, he could be a session player and not break a sweat. Like, he's really remarkably talented at guitar player, and I'm neither of those. Like, I'm pretty good at programming, and I'm pretty good at playing guitar, and I think both of those influence my music making, because it's something I really respond to about the kind of, you know, playing things in live is there's just like a textural, you know, in a way it's a lot about the experiments bundle that you guys have. There's a performative quality. I'm a big fan of patches that kind of have a bit of a human component in them. It feels like someone's actually, you know, playing the thing, rather than everything's been, you know, meticulously sampled.
Clean, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. If you kind of mix and match and go upon like what excites you as a creator, and like, oh, this patch is really inspiring because it's like making me play different on the keyboard, or it's making me think about the phrase in a way that, like, I didn't think about before, and it's kind of leading me in a direction that's exciting. Having things like performance samples and your guys' stuff, it just opens up the kind of, at least for me, I don't sit down and go, okay, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. As a media composer, it's very, for me, it's kind of almost improvisatory. It's like I they want to collaborate with me. The picture's kind of changing almost always throughout the process, and the music is it's not like that, you know, I don't start with the perfect vision of the score. I'm playing against the picture. I'm looping the scene over and over, and each time I'm picking out some detail in the picture, or detail in the cinematography, that I'm like, ooh, I'd like to kind of highlight that, or that's a really kind of emotive moment and I want to capitalize on it or something. So having these kind of performative samples around, or having, you know, the string instruments around, or the modular synths, there's an element of performance with those that, you know, just like pencil and paper notes on a page or notes on a piano roll, that you I like being open to happy accidents.
Do you have any advice? Because I'm sure there's gonna be like a ton of people when watch this interview like, oh, about remote control, the place, right, the ultimate goal. So do you have any words of advice for people who aspire, or, you know, their goal is to work there?
I think it's still a remarkable place to work at, and you should absolutely try and get in there if that is like the kind of main motivator of what you think is going to help. But I feel like the climate of film music has kind of, it's very different from 2007 when I rolled up to that place. Like the campus is different in terms of like how dispersed it is now. It used to be maybe a bit more kind of tight. There's just like a lot more people there now, which isn't to say that you wouldn't gain a ton of knowledge and a ton of, but there's so many more people, I think, out in the world now doing this and being kind of really rigorous about just doing this for a living. Like I just feel like back when I was doing stuff for Hans, there was like the Sonic Implants Library, there's the Vienna Symphonic Library, and there's the East West Library. And those are like the 3 orchestral libraries. And you had to try and make music sound good with one of those 3. Now the climate is so much more populated. Like there's so many developers. I think simultaneous to that, there's so many people that are focused on programming and mocking up orchestral performances or kind of hybrid performances. There's so much content like freely available on YouTube, for instance. When back in 2007, none of that existed. So it, go for trying to work at remote control. I think, being prepared to work insanely long hours and just have a good attitude throughout all of that. That's really having a kind of a nice pleasant way about yourself and being committed and working hard. That's pretty much like what they're looking for. I mean, they want someone that's just dedicated. You don't need to roll up with like a crazy CV, I don't think. I mean, maybe it's changed since I was more closely linked to Hans's world in 2012. Since I've moved away and joined Bleeding Fingers, I'm not so tied up in that, but I really think there's so much amazing information out there that anyone that has the desire to do this doesn't necessarily need to go to remote control to have a really successful career. Like it used to be kind of like this hub where they were well known for kind of teaching, it being a place where you could learn about it, develop your craft, and Hans would even like hoist you up and give you an opportunity to shine. Now, I just think there's so many more places that offer those same sorts of things.
Okay, yeah, that's really, really important, I think, to know. And why this sort of transition well with the next question I had for you, because you mentioned Bleeding Fingers. So yeah, I mean, another one of the most sought after composer collective studios in the world. Like, and you're the lead composer, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you work there? How is it there?
I mean, it's amazing. It's a great place, and I'm so fortunate to have kind of it right around the time that I was kind of finishing up being the technical engineer person for Hans and training my replacement. His business partner, Steve Kofsky, who's kind of just been a bit of an architect in my arc throughout my time there, was just like, hey, I really think you should meet Russell. He's got Russell Emanuel. He's got this new venture going, and they're kind of looking for composers. And that was back in, I want to say 2011, somewhere around there, before Bleeding Fingers was an actual kind of named entity.
Yeah, was it extreme music or like was something different?
It was kind of, I was part of the pilot program of like, let's try this idea where Russell kind of, we get a show. One of the first shows that we did was Mountain Men, and it was like a 30 track order, and they wanted us to kind of provide the emotional kind of blueprint for the show in 30 tracks, like the high points, the low points, the emotional, the action, the kind of tension, dark moments, frenetic moments, all encompassing in 30 tracks, the kind of sound of the show. And so the plan was Russell and I were going to work together in terms of delivering those 30 tracks. And then they had a music editor on their side that we would deliver them stems. So everything separate from, strings and brass and percussion and all the rest of it. And the music editor would then have all of those assets to then kind of, cut the show together. And if there was a particular moment from the show that they wanted scored, we'd score it. And that was like very, very early on. And it was successful. It was like Russell and I had a blast doing it. Like it was just a really collaborative, like Russell's a remarkably brilliant kind of music producer, and always has ideas that kind of either challenge what I'm doing in an exciting way or kind of reinforce what I was already headed down the path on and kind of elevates it. And so, yeah, we just got along really well. And that was, I think, one of the first kind of Bleeding Fingers projects. And then a couple people joined on soon after. And back then when we were doing it, there wasn't a building we now have a building on the Hans's campus where there's in-house composers, and it's like a staff of, I don't know, 20 writers or something like that. I'm not sure the exact number, but
the elite in the music world.
Well, right. I wouldn't go that far, but that's where we are. It was really like right place at the right time, kind of chance meeting that I have to thank Steve Kosky for kind of introducing me to Russell, because he's the CEO of Bleeding Fingers. And
do you think that Bleeding Finger, is so relevant? Do you think it's sort of changing the traditional role director composer? Or
it's a good question. I sort of, but maybe not. Like the way I feel like it's always been evolving, and maybe it's like back in 1970s or even the 80s, whatever, Goldsmith Williams time. It was the film was kind of not edited in the computer. There were themes that were going to be strongly associated with moments. And so things would be, in sync. And there's something beautiful and kind of like chance, like, happy accidents about that process where it wasn't exact. And you kind of show up to the scoring stage, and then things would be adjusted there to the film. And the process has just changed so much. The deadlines are so much tighter. The film isn't at a final cut often until the dub stage, So like the composer is scoring with an orchestra, if they're lucky enough to score with an orchestra, not to the final film. It's like they're kind of just saying, okay, if we don't record to a film, we're not going to have a score. So we better try and just call this a version that we're going to record to. And so it winds up being the case that in order for, I mean, there are people that are superhuman in my view that can just take on a project and see it to the end and be just one person and score the whole thing. But I think more likely and more often these days, it is a team of people that is, you know, maybe there's a figurehead that's coming up with the main concept, the main score, the main tunes. But more and more often, I think there is like, you know, a person with the kind of artistic vision, and then also some people that he collaborates with that helps him out or her out to deliver the final score in the tight time that they have.
Because I assume this composer will work also on multiple projects at the same time.
I mean, the budget shrinks, so you have to take on as many projects as you can to kind of, it's just the industry is continuously changing, and the trend that I've witnessed is, you know, tighter turnaround times for less money is like the so in order to get things done, it winds up being the case that if you want to do this for a living, you got to do, it's kind of a bit of a volume business. You have to write a lot of music. And if you're writing a lot of music and you're taking on a couple projects at a time to kind of succeed in doing it for a living, you oftentimes rely on other, you know, composers to help you get to the finish line. And so I think Bleeding Fingers is kind of, even though it's a kind of team of composers, I think that sort of model of like many people working on one project has been happening in the background for, you know, probably 2 decades or so. It's been evolving in that direction. So I don't know how disruptive it is to kind of, to the industry. It's a curious thing. I mean, it was a good question. It's just, I think, kind of nuanced and hard to answer, maybe.
Yeah. Do you think, you know, like, you know, just come to mind a question, you know, remote control or also Bleeding Fingers, you know, you might work together, you know, lots of people, and you maybe have to adjust in a way to what's already there. So do you think that it kind of gets a bit uniform, the music, you know, like it's all like a bit similar all throughout, or like you can retain your individual voice anyway?
I feel like a lot of the uniformity, and this is just my own personal view.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't speak on behalf of anyone, but I think a lot of it is kind of top down from, you know, most films these days have or projects, you know, TV show, what have you, have a temp soundtrack already laid in. And Hans has been very smart about, with a lot of his collaborators, writing before there's even an edit of the film, and work the music and sending them to the director. And he's not the only person doing this, but what winds up happening is they'll cut it into the film, and so his voice is retained through the edit process. A lot of times, you know, you'll be hired on a project and they'll be like in love with this piece of music that's already existing from the remote control camp that they really love, and you try and do something different, and you try and do something that's your own take on things, and it's usually kind of dismissed out of hand and copy this. So I don't think like I don't think the campus at large kind of forces this kind of uniformity of voice so much as like the projects that we're hired to do kind of reinforce, because of the soundtrack, reinforce this kind of voice, if that makes sense.
it was really interesting because we were talking about working in teams, collaboration. I don't know if you happened to read, there was recently a Vanity Fair article.
I did read
Being
that.
famous, the how the millions do they actually write it, the ugly truth of how the movie scores are made, about how these composers that don't get credited, and maybe they're not getting royalties, especially with streaming. So I wanted to ask you, how important do you think royalties are for younger composers, and do you think the streaming royalties, which is really low, is going to affect the way that composers are making a living in near future?
I mean, I'm definitely hugely concerned about it. I think royalties is for me and my trajectory. Royalties is the bedrock of how I earn a living. I mean, there are creative fees that come in at the front when you sign up to do a project, and those can be extremely competitive and great. Usually, I've seen, in the video game world, they really, because there is no back end in that arena, usually, they really pay a large, hefty, upfront creative fee, and they, at least in my experience, and they don't often make it a package so that the composer gets paid and then doesn't have to, like, out of that pot of money, hire the orchestra and hire all the musicians and hire the mixers and hire all that, the editors and all that stuff. They usually say, okay, we're paying you this because we want you, and then we'll have a budget for producing the score. Streaming it's just it's, I think, fractions of a cent compared to $1 in terms of terrestrial television and cable television. It's a huge concern. I just know that Joseph Trapanese, an amazing composer, he got a group of composers to write a letter to the various performance rights organizations, and I happily signed it, and it just said, if things keep going this way, that composers are going to have a real hard time making a living. I mean, it's a real, if the rate at which the streaming services pay out doesn't increase over time as more audiences move to internet only entertainment instead of other methods, then it's going to be a huge problem. It's something I'm selfishly deeply concerned about, and something I'd say for any young composer is that intellectual property is highly valued, and something that even if the streaming services don't value it, you never know, in terms of your legacy, leaving behind a sum of money for your children. Don't give away your writer's share. Keep your writer's share, because that it will be yours, for a very long time, and you don't know how it's going to be valued time.
Yeah, I think it's so difficult for, younger composers like me. We don't come from a position of power. So, if we did Netflix, you say, okay, Netflix wants to buy out your music. If I say no, it's a point. They're going to be a million other composers, okay. So you don't want even to miss your opportunity. So that's so hard. I think they're really taking advantage of it.
It's something I'm extremely sympathetic to. Like, I mean, even thinking of Bleeding Fingers as a model of like a change in the industry where usually it would be one single composer, and like maybe Bleeding Fingers is now taking jobs away from the single composers as it moves into these different areas. It's not something that I have an answer for. It's something that I see happening, and I also understand the rationale of what you just said, which is like, I need to get a foothold, I need to get kind of name recognition, here's a vehicle for me to do that in this Netflix show. Yeah, they're taking away my royalties, but I need, in order to advance in my career, I need to start getting credits. The thing that's so concerning is that the more people agree to do that, and the more streaming services don't actually pay out, there might not be an industry to speak of. I mean, it might not be the case that you can, except for the very privileged, like 20 people at the top of the food chain, there might not be as strong an occupation as full-time composer as it once was. You know, it might be that, like, I'm teaching to supplement my composition in 10 years. I really don't know. It's a worrisome moment. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. But, hopefully, like you did, signing, big names, come together and send a message. Hopefully everybody will benefit and maybe they will listen.
I would hope so.
I wanted to ask you something also, which comes out from Bleeding Fingers, because when it was a big deal here in the UK, it was Planet Earth.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I mean, it was so successful. I remember we loved it. Also Blue Planet, but yeah, especially Planet Earth. It was such an amazing project to be working on. And you conducted it as well, so at the Royal Albert Hall.
I mean, that was a ridiculous privilege that I was lucky enough to do, but that it could not have been more unexpected that we pitched for that project and got it.
Oh, you did pitch it, right? Yeah.
Because I mean, I think with all BBC productions, at least this is what I understand, is that because it's a government thing, they can't have favoritism, and so each time they go out, they say, okay, we're gonna pitch, and then people pitch for it. No, it's like 2015 that Joshua and I were both at Bleeding Fingers, and Russell just suggested to both of us to take a month and work really hard on this pitch. We spent a lot of time just really trying really hard not to do what we thought was going to work, but rather what we would like the score to be if we had the opportunity. And so Josh and I kind of went away and both, not knowing what the other one was doing, came up with these pitches. And Russell put them together as a package and sent them off. And when they selected us and we wound up like listening to the result, it wound up being such a kind of amazing symbiotic, like Josh and I were operating on a very similar wavelength, even without us knowing it. And it was a beautiful project to work on, and it was amazing working with Tasha.
You wrote like a bunch of tracks then for the pitch, or
for the pitch, I think they gave us 3 scenes.
3? Oh, okay, on a scene. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think each scene was, I want to say, between 3 and 5 minutes or something like that. I think it was like 15 minutes of score. And so we just went away and Joshua wrote 3, each of the 3 scenes, and I wrote each of the 3 scenes. And then we sent it off and on a wing and a prayer, and no expectation that we were going to be selected. Because up to that point, Bleeding Fingers, I mean, it really was like it was geared towards kind of factual television, in kind of the more cable, like not natural history, but just like, documentaries, and it was just a real surprise and profound kind of experience to be picked for that.
You recorded at Air Studios in the end.
We did, which was we did the first session at Angel Studios, which isn't there.
Oh wow, yeah. I recorded that. Yeah, you know what? It's been bought by Abbey Road. I don't know if you know.
Uh, oh,
So
they did. It's
yeah.
gonna
Abbey
live.
Road bought it. Yeah. It's gonna. I think they're gonna use it as almost an academy. But I think hopefully everybody will be able to record. It's such a nice space.
I love that space. I mean, that for the kind of like action material that we recorded there, the kind of more up tempo and biting kind of string sound. It's fantastic. We had Alan Myerson mixing it, which I mean he's so talented, so skilled that I think you could give him any recording and he'd make it work somehow. Like I don't know, I don't know how he does it, but we recorded there and for one day and then 2 days at Air, if I remember correctly. And yeah, loved Angel, and Air is just like it's like the Bentley of recording spaces.
Yeah.
It just sounds like $1 million in there. For lyrical stuff, it's amazing. And if you set the spot mics close enough, you can get a really aggressive sound.
All right, yeah, because there's quite a big reverb in there.
It blooms. Yeah, I mean they can bring the cloud down, but it's still, it speaks for days. Yeah. But what's interesting is you can actually then, because the space it sounds so large, you can get a big sound with less people. And so you actually don't need as many string players to get a really lush sound. Yeah.
Or like try strange things, like Hans, in the gallery, the horns or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this amazing scene I remember with I think it was the Snake Island. There was this chase. Yeah. Oh my God, that was so good.
I wrote that one.
Amazing, really.
Yeah. Thanks. I've worked on like big blockbuster action sequences with like doing additional music for Steve Jablonsky and stuff, and that scene it like eclipses any sort of like big budget, like, and it's just natural phenomena, and it's so much more powerful. I mean, my God.
So did like the huge success, because of the music was really, really praised as well, did that lead to Blue Planet as like, we love the sound you created. It sounds really fresh and new in comparison to other things. So maybe they wanted to, keep on doing that.
I mean, I from my recollection, or at least, I think we had to pitch again. Because
I did pitch again,
yeah, because of the BBC. So each time with the BBC, I mean, but what Russell tells me is that it's a blind pitch too. So they strip them off, and they just play the music. So I'm sure I'm sure maybe the sound, it wasn't too dissimilar from Planet Earth, though we were trying to do something different. Yeah. Maybe they kind of figured out who it was when we submitted the pitch. But as far as I know, we just we just on luck wrote, were able to write something that resonated with them in that pitch.
And I suppose also for them, this project, I don't know how many years it took to make, how much money it took. So having, a name, like, Bleeding Fingers, Hans, you have almost a guarantee, you guys gonna deliver awesome music. So
well, that's nice of you to say. It doesn't feel that way every time I start writing. Every time I start writing, it's like, are all my ideas like out in the world now? Do I have anything left? Kind of panic sets in, abject panic. And then yeah.
Okay. No matter how high on the chain you are, there's always this.
I don't know, maybe Hans feels differently, but certainly for me, it's yeah, I just, but that nervous energy at least starts me off, you know, on a 12-hour day where I'm just trying stuff. And usually I'll have, like, at the end of that day, a bar of music that's like not terrible. And then at least the next day I've got a bar to build off of. That's usually the process, is like freak out, try a lot of things that don't work, and then maybe find one thing that might work, and then look at it with fresh eyes the next day.
Do you, like, when you work, especially on a series, do you have a template beforehand and then you start writing, or like, you got almost nothing, you start?
It depends, like certainly with if you know the orchestra is going to be involved, then it's usually the case that I'll have at least some template. I'm sure, like everyone else that does orchestral mock-ups, I have my favorite kind of violin lead legato soaring legato sound, and I'm always going to use that one because I've spent years playing it, and I like how it sounds, and I like certain flute articulations or woodwind articulations. An omnivorous consumer of sample libraries, and I try and keep as current as possible with everything. But there's usually, a developer that I feel like, okay, this is how an oboe should sound, or whatever, So like, if the traditional orchestral palette is going to be used, then I definitely have a template that I start off with that. When things get weird and a bit more open-ended, it's super freeing for me anyway to like start with just MIDI to the stuff I have in the room and a bunch of audio tracks that are just blank, ready to record. And so I can just like play stuff in the room, and then after the fact, click it out with a tempo map. And that almost always is more musical than like me sitting down trying to fight with these samples to do something.
Yeah, it's true, like picking up a guitar, or I'm a flautist, like you come up with different ideas that you maybe you never thought with the keyboard.
It's true. And there's this kind of like muscle memory. You're just used to playing something. You spent so much time learning this craft of this instrument, and like how to make it sound good. And so just hearing the sound of it being pleasing to you and like recognizable to you. I also think just like acoustically having something, like your piano in the room, like you could have 100 sampled pianos, but going over and hearing the sound of those strings off that soundboard in that room, there's something like, I don't know if it's evolution or what, but we respond to an acoustic performance of something in a space. It makes me play differently. I'm not thinking of a click track and looking at grid lines. I'm thinking about phrasing, and I'm thinking about like emotional intent of the piece and these other like more musical considerations that the computer, maybe one day I'll figure out a way to, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship, because I'm not talented enough or learned enough to be able to orchestrate a piece just from what's in my head. I kind of need to play it out and try things.
Yeah, I think, most of us.
But that there are guys that can, and they can read a full score and reduce it to two hands on a piano and just blast through things. And I've never been that guy. And so I need the computer to kind of express what I'd like to express. And at the same time, like using the computer, it can kind of box you into these kind of 4-bar phrases and these kind of like, it at least it does for me. In every template I have, there's a space at the bottom for literally all the live crap in the room, because that's usually where the idea comes from.
So I wanted to ask you, like, because you got, family and like looking about work-life balance, because I think it's a hard profession being a composer, really long hours, weekends, tight deadline, especially if you work, at your level with like multi-million-dollar project. I don't know, like it must be very, yeah, lots of pressure.
Having a ridiculously understanding and amazing partner in crime. My wife, we met in college, and she's a flautist herself. She got a bachelor's degree in flute performance, and so she is no slouch as a musician. And oftentimes I will get her opinion on stuff, and she's a harsh critic. So if she's liking the piece of music, then I know that I'm doing okay, or maybe I'm on the right track. So insanely helpful to have her kind of understand that from a musician standpoint, that like I really can't imagine myself doing anything else, and that I really like to try and make composition a lifelong pursuit, and so she's just incredibly understanding. And I've been fortunate that as our as our family has grown, my the amount of hours in the studio, it's still a stupid amount of hours, but it's become less stupid as time has gone on.
Okay, yeah.
I used to, when I was assisting Hans, like there would be days when I didn't come home and I would just sleep on the couch at remote, and like we were dating back then, and then when we got married, pretty soon after, a couple of years after, I started working with Russell, and it would be like I'd get to see her for dinner, and then I'd go back and work till 2 a.m, and then wake up the next day and do it all over again for 7 days a week. And it was a grind, right? And I did that for years. And then when Eli, my firstborn son, showed up, it was tough. I was still hustling. It was before Planet Earth kind of showed up. And then, which isn't to say that I stopped hustling after Planet Earth showed up. As a composer, you kind of have to hustle. But I've been lucky that with each kind of development in family life, it's just coincided with me being able to be just that much more flexible in my work schedule, and taking a day off, working 6 days out of 7, has eased the tension at home enough for us to keep going. When I'm at home, music is like the furthest thing away from my kind of consciousness. And so yeah, prioritizing quality time as opposed to like quantity time. When I'm home, I'm present and involved and 100% in. Again, amazing luck to have found this woman in my wife, who is has just been kind of on board. She's just been on board the whole time, and I know not many spouses would be. Like a lot of spouses wouldn't be, but she is. So I'm lucky.
It's amazing that you understand, she understands your passion and your love for music and supports it. Talking about art versus work, just writing for yourself, composing something that just for you, has it happened before? Do you plan to do it?
Before kids, I'd say now that I'm a father, it's non-existent. I feel like that will be something that I revisit when kids are in college. and I guess I'm a bit maybe of an outlier in I wanted to do music for a living, but I never had any illusions of being an artiste or something. Like I loved being around creating things with sound. And like if someone was willing to write me a check for me sitting in a room and messing with this stuff that I think is fun and like toys, you know, and I was considering myself ahead of the curve. So I didn't have this idea in my mind when I started, and I still don't, of being a really successful feature film composer that only does, you know, stuff on the level of Alexander Desplat or something. That like if I wanted to work on like, you know, beautiful films all the time or whatever, his career is a pretty good one to follow. It wasn't in my personality to kind of, I just didn't want that. I just wanted to kind of show up and write and kind of improve, like learn as I work, you know, a bit. Like if something's challenging to me and I find it interesting musically, then it doesn't need to be like my requiem or whatever. It doesn't need to be the thing that I'm remembered for. I just want to engage with music and better understand it, and hopefully at some point write something that you know is meaningful to someone.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very important point. Like, you know, follow what you feel like is right for you. Don't compare yourself to, you know, others or what they're doing.
At least when I was coming up at Remote, a lot of the other assistants that I was working alongside, they wanted to be the next Hans. Like that was their their dream. And for me, I looked at Hans's life and said, that looks really hard. I don't know if I want that much heat. You know, I don't know if I want that much pressure. I that's not.
Do you think he gets used to pressure, like, you know, at his level?
I think he's the kind of person that kind of thrives with pressure.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's like it's his personality. If I had like 5 buildings in Santa Monica that I was responsible to pay utilities on and like house with a bunch of people that were paying me rent and like also take 5 films on and do 2 TV shows and all that stuff, that doesn't sound exciting to me. That sounds like a lot of stress that I don't want to take on.
Yeah, especially with a family. I think family changes you, you know.
I mean, I always wanted a family. So I kind of like, maybe it goes hand in hand, like your ambition to, I mean, I guess it's different for everyone, but my ambition was to get paid to be around music and to have a family that was happy to have me in their lives. If I checked those boxes, I was doing great. I just didn't lose sight of that, you know, moving down here and pursuing this whole world. Like you said, you know, stay true to yourself and kind of follow your North Star, what you think is going to bring you happiness.
So I was wondering if you could share what you've been working on recently or what you're working on. I assume, I know if you got, you know, if you can't share it, the word.
That,
or
yeah, I'm under, whatchamacallit, the cloak of secrecy or whatever. I can't say, but I did just finish, with Bleeding Fingers. I finished the 2nd season of this this like thriller psychological drama called Pagan Peak, which is it's a German production, and it was this, the 2nd season is from the producers that did the Netflix series Dark.
Oh, okay, yeah, big hit.
It was super rewarding because that duo, Cyril and Philip, the filmmakers, are just, they're brilliant writers and they're brilliant filmmakers. And you know, it's similar to Planet Earth in the sense that I look at the footage and go, God, I hope my music's as good. Like if I get it as good as what I'm seeing and you know, witnessing, then I'm okay. You know, the bar is high, and so it's intimidating and also exciting.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to, push yourself and try something new, maybe.
Yeah. So that one was really really fun, and it was during the pandemic, so I was in this space, though it didn't look like it currently does. It had a lot more stuff in it, but it also didn't have any lights up here and all that stuff. So it, it was a lot of experimentation. I used this electric cello, that's a fretted. Yeah, I found this. Yeah, I'll show you. It's cool. This is the this is the, so it's on a stand, and it's got frets, and it's got an active pickup in it, and I just run it through a bunch of random stuff, and I'll play like ostinatos on it, and my bowing is terrible. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's a sound that like it is unique. And that's like really one of the main voices in the show is that instrument, and a lot of those things. And I just got the Iridium synth from Waldorf that has a ridiculous granular processing engine on it. So even though it's a synth, I was using it as a glorified stereo effects processor, and I then like sampled orchestra through it, but then like use the envelopes and the LFOs on it to like tweak the granular parameters.
Wow,
I got some
sounds awesome.
Yeah. So it was like it was the opposite of the orchestral template. It was like, just try weird stuff, and I had a blast.
Did they, like, the producer director push you, or like, go all in with strange stuff, or like?
It's a good question. I mean, we had worked on season 1 together, and so there were certain things in place that they were fond of. So and this, I had used this in season 1. I've had that electric cello for probably, 4 years now, and it's a not so secret weapon. And so they that kind of had been part of the fabric for a while, and then they wanted to just expand the world. The chief antagonist of the season was a kind of failed conservatory pianist that couldn't get into college, and
Worse.
I know. And so there's a lot of manipulation of like piano sounds, and so it was just like they were really open to experimentation, and it's so fun working with them, because they're the opposite of the guys that say you have to do this temp thing, like you don't have to sound like anyone other than try and make the scene like the way that you think will be most successful. And then they listen to it and go, yeah, we don't agree with this approach at all. or they're like, we didn't think about it in this way, and actually we really like this idea. So it's really fun to work on.
Wow. So when is it coming out, this second season?
It just came out like, I think a week ago or two.
Oh, it's out. Oh, awesome. I need to check it out.
It's a very weird and wonderful series.
I can't wait to watch it. Yeah, wow. So as a last question, I want to ask you, if you could give a word of advice to your older self, when you're starting out, but I suppose not thinking about present day, so what would you say?
Double down on what excites you about music, and don't worry so much about trends or don't try and put up the blinders as much as you can creatively, and hone whatever voice that you think is like maybe hiding away, because truly I know that everyone thinks of remote control as like this monolith where everything sounds exactly the same, but in truth I don't think it's like that at all. And I do think that every success story I've witnessed there has come from someone bringing something different to the table. And don't be afraid to record stuff into the sequencer, and like maybe start there, because I'll listen back to things that I've done from like 10 years ago, and if it was done with me playing something, it never sounds old. And if I listen to something that like I programmed with sonic implants and old Giga Studio samples, I'm not saying that like samples have an expiration date on them, but there's something that like the musicality that you find in performing or getting someone else to perform is always attractive to a listener, like always. And I don't know if producers or directors necessarily can pinpoint it as the thing that they're responding to, but valuing live musicians and paying live musicians, and it doesn't have to be Air Studios to be unbelievably great. Like Tina Guo is a remarkable cellist that's really well known now, but for years she was doing stuff in her apartment and supplying it to like game composers and stuff, and it was just as good then as it is now. But she wasn't this kind of person that everyone knew. So there are players out there that are exceptional and are as interested in being exceptional at their instrument as you are at composing. So like if you have an idea and you feel like the sample's getting you 80% there, and you really want to impress whoever's on the other side listening to it, whether it be a composer that you're applying for an apprenticeship with or a producer of a project that you want to get, spending an extra $50 to have someone play for an hour on something, or whatever it is, whatever you determine as the appropriate compensation, goes such a long way.
Absolutely. Wow, that's really, really inspiring to hear. I'm sure this will really inspire so many people.
That would be great. I feel like I've been rambling, quite honestly.
No, honestly, like generally, Jacob, thank you so much. It was like such a good talk. We touched so many points. Thank you so much for your time. I know you.
It's my pleasure.
Busy, so talking with me, I so much appreciate it. Take care, man.
All right, you too.
Bye.